Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
8:07, and we are all fired up and raring to go here on O'Connor and Company. A big Wednesday morning as we give you a full analysis and summary of last night's speech by Donald Trump to a joint session of Congress and the lamentable display from Democrats during that speech, which really is, sadly, 50% of the story. By the way, coming up in 30 minutes, we're going to be joined by Jennie Taer of New York Post to give us a breaking story on some deportations of illegal immigrants that had been flown in from countries, hostile countries like Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela. The Joe Biden flew here on your dime, and, well, now they'll be flying back. We'll give you all those details coming up. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning. This has been so fun. You know, I'm not on every day, and I'm so glad when I'm on these days that sort of something big has happened, because it's always fun to hear your analysis and kind of figure it out with you. Well,
and it's fun and enlightening to hear yours as well. DJ Daniels is a little 13-year-old boy who's been diagnosed with, well, you know what? Tell you what, let's let the President of the United States tell DJ's story.
There you go.
Let's start with cut 16 here from last night's speech, cut 16.
But in 2018, DJ was diagnosed with brain cancer. The doctors gave him 5 months at most to live. That was more than 6 years ago. Since that time, DJ and his dad have been on a quest to make his dream come true, and DJ has been sworn in as an honorary law enforcement officer, actually a number of times. The police love him, the police departments love him. And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
The look on this little boy's face when he heard that was just, it absolutely rips your heart out. And you can't not smile. You can't not get emotional. Then, oh my goodness, after Curran hands him the Secret Service badge, and his father who has been, think about his father driving him to chemotherapy treatments and radiation treatments and holding his hands as he wakes up from brain surgery. His father there with him lifts him up to his chest. Almost, he couldn't quite get him to his shoulders because he's 13 now. He's getting big.
Yeah.
And this little boy raises up the badge, the Secret Service badge, and then he leans over to Director Curran and gives him this giant hug. And, Curran, he's a tough guy. This is he's a Secret Service agent.
Kid.
He's the guy, by the way, he was in that picture next to Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. You recognize his face. This is a tough guy, a big man, willing to take a bullet, and he melted. He melted when this little boy.
He was doing a Larry O'Connor. He was tearing up. But honestly, I got to tell you, when that father lifted his son up and his son held that badge up, it reminded me a little bit of the fight, fight, fight moment. It really was. And this kid has been fighting for his life. So really a touching moment.
You heard the gallery erupt in applause. Republicans started chanting his name, DJ, DJ, and it felt like for a moment this partisan divide in that house, that historic House of Representatives, might soften, but then the cameras showed the Democrats. And it was as predictable as it was devastating to see them sitting mute, clutching protest signs, staring ahead with the grim resolve of a losing chess player, seeing the board in front of them, knowing that they've lost the match, but still holding firm to their strategy.
Some of them were on their phones. Debbie Wasserman Schultz looked like she had nothing but disgust for this story.
No, she looked like she had bad gas is what she looked like. and as if that wasn't bad enough.
Are we going to get to Nicole?
Julie. You then go to the post-speech analysis on MSNBC. And Nicole Wallace, who I was going to say once called herself a Republican, but I'll actually amend that and say she once called herself an emotional human being with some sort of level of empathy. Now, I think she may be a sociopath, because only someone suffering under some sort of evil obsession over Donald Trump could bring herself to deliver this analysis of that moment. Take a listen to what MSNBC presented last night as political analysis of Donald Trump's speech, and specifically that moment.
But I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ, and I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
I mean, you know how we
I'll
always
let you
talk
pick
about
it
how,
up here in a second.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Let me just say, that's not analysis. Okay, this is she's stuck in a fever dream to project your January 6th trauma onto this child's moment of light. To deliver analysis that amounts to, hey, glad you survived cancer, really cool with the badge there. Be a shame if you committed suicide in the future. That using this boy's moment of triumph as a billboard for your grievance, that's a choice. That's a choice that she made. And I'm sorry, if you cannot take a moment to cheer for DJ Daniels, your politics have broken your soul, Nicole Wallace. And it's time to step back and maybe find a new job.
She is an absolute ghoul. An absolute ghoul. And if anybody at MSNBC had an ounce of courage and morals, they would fire her this morning and issue a statement apologizing to that boy and his father, and frankly, all of the American public for having to listen to that. That is sick. And what they're doing, what MSNBC is legitimizing this kind of thing, where it's all, we always talk about how with the libs, it's everything is political, everything is politics. There's no moment where you can just set it aside and be sorrowful on something or give grace to someone. No, it's always political.
Be a human being.
Be a human being.
Be a human being.
A human being, and take a moment to recognize this really incredible moment. And also for the Secret Service, you mentioned earlier, the Secret Service has been through a lot in the last, several months, much of it deserved, but this was a moment for them. Trump said it's such an honor to be a part of the Secret Service. So just let it go. She really is a horrible human being.
Yeah. And by the way, I just want to remind everybody, Nicole Wallace is one of the people who made the cut. They just fired a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But Nicole Wallace is one that they thought, oh no, she's good. She's who we want representing us.
She's reasonable.
All right. More on the president's speech last night, some details from it. We'll play some more moments, and also some of the poll. We've already got polling on this speech from both CNN and CBS, and well, it's very favorable to the president. We'll share that with you in a moment, too. But first, it's 8:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live.
To the results. What was your reaction to Trump's speech? 44% of speech watchers in our instant poll tonight say they had a very positive reaction to Trump's speech. 25% somewhat positive, 31% negative.
Do the math. That means 69% of viewers on the instant poll on CNN said it was either very positive or somewhat positive. The only thing you can get 69% of Americans to agree on with Joe Biden was that they thought he wore adult diapers. Other than that, it was pretty much mixed responses to the Biden presidency. But here, 69% said that they had a positive or very positive view. Over on CBS News, their poll, Trump's speech, 76% approved of the speech, 23% disapproved. Majority of speech viewers described the president as presidential, inspiring, unifying, and a big majority called the speech entertaining. Think about that. It was over 90 minutes long, a political speech that stretched into the 11 o'clock hour, and the viewers on CBS News found it entertaining. Probably more entertaining than, the latest sitcom CBS is trying to shove
100%.
down our throats.
Yes.
And there is something to be said for the entertainment aspect. I keep pointing out that Trump understands the theatrics, the important visuals and theatrics of the presidency. All right, let's get to some of the details here. How about we start with cut 23 as the president listed off some of the wasteful spending discovered by the Department of Government Efficiency.
$40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million.
I do love it when he does the stand-up. By the way, the list continued. $8 million to make mice transgender. $32 million for left-wing propaganda operations in Moldova. $10 million for male circumcision in Mozambique. $59 million for illegal alien hotel rooms in New York City. $101 million for DEI contracts in the Department of Education, and on and on and on. But beyond just cutting that wasteful spending, Trump has ambitious goals for this Congress, or maybe the next Congress. He wants to do more than just give tax cuts and cut spending. Listen to this on cut 24.
I want to do what has not been done in 24 years, balance the federal budget. We're going to balance it.
Yes.
I mean, it's ambitious, but you know what? Believe it or not, it wasn't that long ago when Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich put it together. We will have a balanced budget as soon as the American people demand that their elected leaders bring a balanced budget.
There's
That's
been this sort of this narrative, sort of among the never Trump set, and also obviously Democrats, that this spending that DOJ is cutting, that won't make a dent. That's not going to do anything. But This is good governance. This is looking at how our government spends money and saying, enough. This doesn't have to necessarily erase the deficit or erase the debt. This is a classic good governance, looking for waste, fraud, and abuse, which the Democrats used to be great on this, fair on this issue.
Well, they used to talk a good game. Yeah.
Right. And so, when you list these things, it goes a long way, especially, as the mother of 3 teenagers who cannot believe the prices of food. When I hear, $60 million for indigenous Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America, or, an Arab, $20 million for an Arab Sesame Street program, it makes me mad. And I want someone to focus on that. So it's not wasteful. It's not a waste of time for DOJ and for Elon Musk to tackle this stuff. This is good.
Listen, it's such a long speech, and we've been covering a lot of good moments. Please download the podcast so you can get even more of what we covered this morning. Subscribe to it as well. I want to get to this, cut 45, where Trump called Senator Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas during the speech. Here, listen.
With no end in sight, the United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense, with no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes. $2,000 people are being killed every single week.
That's plenty. That's where he's talking about Ukraine. By the way, he also announced the arrest of Mohammed Sharifullah. That's the ISIS terrorist who orchestrated the Abbey Gate attack. That's a big deal, he announced. And then finally, let's go to the closing of the speech. Cut 50 here, a pretty good way for us to start our day every day. We might incorporate this into our opening of our show. Take a listen.
Every single day we will stand up and we will fight, fight, fight for the country our citizens believe in and for the country our people deserve. My fellow Americans, get ready for an incredible future because the golden age of America has only just begun. It will be like nothing that has ever been seen before. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
It's 8:23.
Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
I think what many people believe to be the best line from President Trump last night, and that's saying something because it was a 90-minute speech full of a lot of good lines, but this one sort of summed up his victory, summed up the last 4 years, and summed up the first 6 weeks of this 47th president's tenure. Take a listen to cut 10 here.
The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation. We must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president.
That's right. It shows the disastrous policies that we saw here where President Biden and Kamala Harris, the borders are deliberately left the border open, letting in criminals into this country and flooding our nation and our nation's cities with an untenable situation. And it also shows the lie that we kept hearing and repeated, and the media and the Democrats that, oh, well, we need that bipartisan bill. We need that. Can't do anything without it. Jennie Taer covers the border for the New York Post, and she joins us now because she's seen firsthand. First of all, Jennie, because I know you've got a breaking story here that we want to discuss, but can you tell us, is it a palpable difference now with regard to how the Border Patrol is monitoring the border compared to before President Trump was sworn into office, and the flow of humanity across that border? What do you witness firsthand?
Absolutely. I think that, from what we've seen with our own eyes, when I was down at the border during some of the record months of illegal immigration under the Biden administration, you saw hundreds of migrants to 1 or 2 Border Patrol agents. They were overwhelming the system, and it was very obvious visually. I was just down in El Paso just a couple weeks ago down at the border in that sector, and I saw 6 Border Patrol agents to 1 illegal migrant. I was out there for 4 hours, and there was one single apprehension of a migrant from Mexico who was trying to evade, and that's really what they're seeing right now. We've seen a change in the makeup of the people crossing. It's now a lot more Mexicans because they're closer in proximity. They're not spending as much money as, let's say, an Afghan. And so they have a little less to lose, although this guy that we encountered was, teary-eyed, upset, obviously. And it was his second time trying to cross, and he knew that he was going to be sent back. And now the Trump administration is actually flying Mexicans to Mexico's southern border in an effort to keep them from continually crossing right there at their northern border with the U.S.
Jennie, again, we want to get to that breaking news, but I do want to ask you one quick question here. I know you talk to Border Patrol all the time. What is the difference in their morale like right now? They must be so relieved with this drop in border crossings.
Right. When I think back about some of my sources and how we started talking initially, a lot of it was when this situation was overwhelming, when they were bogged down by illegal immigration, and they needed someone to be their voice out there and to get the story out about what was happening on the inside, that they were letting national security risks into our country, that they were letting children into the hands of traffickers. And that all started to become, out of frustration when there was a vaccine mandate in the Border Patrol and the federal government, and they started to speak out. And I saw them at their worst at that moment. I have never seen such a turnaround in the morale. the way that these guys feel so excited to go to work. They're happy with their jobs. They're feeling like they're doing their job and securing the border. Before, they were describing their jobs as babysitting. And they felt, guilty over letting people go and being part of the smuggling operation. That's how they described it. Completely a 180 from what we saw under the Biden administration.
Well, of course they felt terrible. I mean, you don't join law enforcement to sit back and let these horrible things happen. I mean, it must have been torturous to their souls. These law enforcement people seeing bad people doing horrible things and having their chain of command tell them to stand down. Jennie Taer joins us from the New York Post, and you've got an exclusive here having to do with what the Biden administration referred to as humanitarian parole, involving over 500,000 who, am I right, they flew these people in directly? We paid to fly them from Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, and other countries?
So this is right. The CHNV parole program, Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, those were the migrants that were allowed to fly into the United States under the Biden administration in the 30,000 number each month. And they came on commercial planes, but they were given permission to come here for a period of 2 years, as long as they had a sponsor in the U.S. They also were allowed to work in the United States. This was an effort by the Biden administration to try to clamp down on illegal immigration. It clearly didn't work. They opened that pathway, and they also opened the CBP-1 app at ports of entry along the southern border. This flight program allowed more than 500,000 migrants into the United States, and the Trump administration ended those applications on day one. But now they are also moving to cancel the parole, the permission that these migrants had to stay in the country. So the ones already here, those 500,000, will now likely have their parole status revoked, and they will now be up for removal if they did not apply for some sort of extra relief. There are different avenues some of these migrants have, but there's still thousands of migrants that will likely be part of this deportation effort. So it's kind of like an expansion of Trump's mass deportation program. We've seen that they want to get the worst first. They want to get criminals. They've taken some illegal immigrants in as collateral if they're around those criminals when they're making arrests. And then at the same time, people with final removal orders. And now you're also adding potentially hundreds of thousands of more targets to this list. So it's a huge expansion of that.
So this is the next step, I guess, on these on this mass deportation, and this seems like a good list and group of people to go after as well. Especially, by the way, are we paying to fly them back home, or are their home countries going to be paying for that?
It's a good question. The Trump administration is encouraging these migrants to self-deport because, one, it's cheaper for the taxpayer, but it's also less hassle for the illegal migrant. Do you want to go home shackled by your wrists and ankles, or do you want to just go home on your own terms, go back to your family, whatever it is? This program, though, it should be noted of how many red flags there were with it. We know that the Biden administration had earlier paused it because of fraud concerns. I mean, people were using the same sponsor. They were using the same addresses, social security numbers. There were a lot of issues with fraud with this program. And on top of that, you also had some individuals who have come into this country under the program who have turned out to be criminals, who have turned out to be rapists. There was one in Massachusetts, a Haitian migrant who was allowed into a shelter in Massachusetts, and he ended up allegedly raping a child there. This is just one example of possibly many that we maybe don't know about. Some we do know about, but it was not the vetting, the extra vetting that the Biden administration has promised. They paused that program because of fraud, and then they just restarted it pretty quickly after pausing it. And, we know what happened. We know that they let in these individuals through it.
All right, we got to leave it there. Jennie Taer, New York Post. Thank you, as always, for joining us.
Thank you.
It is 8:45. As you know, Monday night, the Trump administration announced that they would put a freeze on all additional funding to Ukraine as they reevaluate that relationship after the debacle in the Oval Office where President Zelensky rejected Vice President J.D. Vance's mention of diplomacy. Remember, that's what triggered this. J.D. Vance said, "Yeah, we're going to use diplomatic efforts to reach a ceasefire here and a conclusion." And Zelensky was like, "Can I talk to you about that whole diplomacy thing? That seriously, that's what triggered him." And then, of course, he went on to say, "Oh, you think you're safe because you have your oceans, but you'll see soon." And that was enough for Trump. He thought that was a threat. That was, and so it was over. He kicked him out of the Oval Office. Yep. Zelensky goes to Europe. He gets tweets from people, but then it turns out that tweets don't pay for bullets.
That's right.
And so yesterday, Volodymyr Zelensky put together a very long. It reminded me of the moment in Fish Called Wanda when Kevin Kline hangs John Cleese out the window upside down, and he says, "I'm terribly, terribly sorry. I do apologize. I don't know what I was thinking." And he continued it this morning. He has another big tweet here saying that he needs to coordinate efforts with leadership. "I want peace. I want it sooner rather than later. We can get to peace real fast. Oh, yeah, diplomacy sounds great to me. Don't turn off the money." So we'll see what happens here. But
yeah, he really is embarrassing
he's definitely
himself.
Singing a different tune now.
Indeed. There you go.
It is 8:53.